Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where I feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, optimize, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And today's guest is Chris Wilson. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Adi. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's so awesome to have you on this podcast. And I want to thank Ken Trupke for introducing us. Ken introduced me to great people. So everyone introduced me to is fantastic. You know how it is that great people introduce other great people. So I'm glad he actually made a connection and you are here on this podcast. So thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah. So let's start with your bio and then we'll dive into a great conversation. So you're a former IT guy and you left corporate America to invest in franchising.
Correct.
So in addition to your franchise investments, you also help clients identify and analyze franchise opportunities and save them time and money during the search. Because as we all know, it can be a very tedious process. And there is also a lot of unknowns and you don't know where to invest, would it be a good investment or not. And, it really appealed to me to bring you as a guest on the podcast because we're all about systems. And we say, okay, you're an entrepreneur and you have a business. So let's make your business as if though you're franchising it, right? Let's have all your playbooks in place. Let's have all your systems in place. So I love businesses that have systems, and obviously a franchise has systems because that's how they can franchise. Mm-hmm. So what attracted you to invest in franchises?
Yeah, I think my introduction to franchises was at a young age. I was 14 working at an ice cream store, which happened to be a franchise. And what was interesting was that the person that owned that particular unit, their father would invest in franchises for their children. So when his kids turned 25, he would buy them a business, particularly a franchise, because of the systems and processes. And so he understood that it would not be easy, but an easier path than having to figure out all of that stuff on your own. And at 14, instead of learning how to make ice cream cones, I was trying to figure out how to get my own franchise.
That's amazing. Amazing. So how did you get your first franchise?
So fast forward a few years after that, I went home once I figured out that this guy's dad bought him a business. And I asked my dad if he had any intentions of buying me a business when I turned 25. And he told me to go to school and work as hard as I could. So that's what I did. And then a couple years later, I got laid off from my corporate job. I didn't like the way that felt. So I secured work pretty quickly after that. But in my free time, I was trying to do as much research on franchising as I could. And I wanted to figure out a way to have, my plan at the time was to have an additional stream of income. So if I was laid off from my IT job, it wouldn't be as an adverse effect. And so I started chatting with folks that I knew in my network, and my mentor happened to be in franchising. So I started picking his brain. We went through a similar process to what I put my clients through today. And I was able to pick my first franchise and it went really well.
That's amazing. Amazing.
Awesome.
Chris, this is an amazing story how you got started. So what was your first franchise?
So my first franchise was in the fitness space. It's a brand called Club Pilates. So I built out a couple locations here in the Orlando area, and we provided Pilates to the masses. And so that was my first franchise investment.
That's great. And how involved were you? Like how hands-on were you on your first investment?
So at the time, I was what you considered a semi-absentee owner, meaning I still had my corporate career. So I was working my corporate job full time, 40 hours plus. I worked on the business on average about 20 hours per week. I want to be clear, though, in the beginning, it was much more than 20, right? You're learning the business, you're hiring staff, you're working with construction folks, you're doing all of the things that are required to get the business up and running. As the business becomes successful, you can then scale back to as little as you see fit. I always like to tell people, just to be perfectly candid, that even though it's a franchise, the business is still not going to run itself. So you still need to do some work, right? People have this misconception that franchises, you just put them on autopilot and great things happen. And I just want to be clear that you still got to put in the elbow grease and do the work.
You absolutely do. So if you had to give an advice to other business owners, like what are some of the actions that were successful for you in order to scale the business at the beginning?
So in the beginning, I think you have to do as much discovery as you can to learn what it takes to be successful. So I always tell my clients, as you're doing your due diligence, find out what it takes to be average. Find out what the average revenue is, and then you can obviously make some decisions on if you want to be above average or below average. I think most of us want to be above average if we really think about it. And so if you know what it takes to be average, then you know what it takes to be above average. And you can put some policies and things in place to make sure that you fall in that top quadrant, which is where most of us want to be. I think you have to hire really good people. At its core, even though it's a franchise, you still have people that are going to be the face of the business, especially when you're not there. So you need to make some really smart decisions about hiring and retaining folks. If you have to keep training people every 3 days or months or whatever that time frame is, that can have an adverse effect on your business. Sometimes it's worth to pay people a little bit more and to treat them better than the competition will, so that you don't have to worry about that turnover as much.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. It's people and processes. I mean, that's basically what you're describing. So how do you do that discovery? Like, how do you recommend to your clients to do that discovery phase and find out like what is average or how to get to an average? I mean, I like that. I mean, you go, okay, this is the average. This is the bare minimum. Of course, I want to be better. But how do you discover that?
So it's a twofold process. The first is really digging into the FDD, or the franchise disclosure document. So for folks that may not be as familiar with franchising, that's a document that's regulated by the FTC, and you have to have it in your possession for 14 days before you can invest in a franchise. The document is split up into something called items. And so, for example, item 19 is the financial performance representation from the franchise. So I show my clients how to analyze that document, how to turn the data that's in there into information. That's the first step. That's finding out what the baseline is. And then the second step, which is really unique to franchising, is the validation piece. So I encourage my clients and I show them a process of how to talk to people that are actually running the business to find out if that was their experience or not. And so you want to talk to people that are, some folks that have been in the network for 10 years, some folks that have been in for 10 days, right? And find out what the differences there are. You want to talk to folks that have similar demographics as to the community that you're thinking about launching the business, so that you can understand what their challenges were, how they overcame those, and if you're going to have similar challenges. And so that validation piece is really unique to franchising, because there are not too many other models out there where someone across the country or across town is running the same business model that you're about to implement.
Right. That's true. I mean, the business model, but it also, I mean, I would assume it also depends on the population and where you're at, because maybe Pilates will be an amazing thing to do in Orlando, but then if you go to another place where it's not that popular, it might not stick as much.
Great point, right? Like, we know that Pilates works in California and Orlando and Miami. Does it work in Nebraska and Iowa, right? And so those are questions.
Oh, it might, and you just need to then invest more in promotion in order to make it known. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So what we're trying to do is find similarities across different data sets from a demographic perspective. So it could be household income, it could be population, it could be how much money people have to spend on stuff. And so once you have those data points, you can make some projections. It's always great to not be the first one going into an untapped market, right? But if someone can do it and you can duplicate that success, then that's, to me, the benefit of franchising.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So after you bought a Pilates franchise, what other franchises did you invest in?
So I sold the Pilates franchises a couple years ago, had a successful exit, which was awesome. And then I invested in a salon suite franchise. So I've built out one location and working on building out a couple more. So we rent space to beauty and wellness professionals. So think barbers, hairstylists, nail techs, nurse practitioners, coaches, things of that nature. We make the space beautiful, give them a great platform for them to launch their business. And then we help them with some of the marketing that goes along with being a business owner. So it's a great way for me to stay in touch with aspiring entrepreneurs and folks that are in different walks of life, and helping them get to the next level.
Absolutely. So what's next? Are you going to invest in more franchises?
Yes. That's part of the problem with being a franchise consultant, is you come across some really interesting brands and you get to hear the stories and meet the corporate folks that are running the business and other franchisees that are doing well. So my plan right now is to build out those additional locations, but I'm sure after that I will find something else that keeps me intrigued.
Absolutely. So you work with franchisees, with people that are looking at buying franchises, not necessarily with the franchisors to make a franchise. Is that correct?
So I do a little of both. So for folks that have a great business model and are looking to turn that business into a franchise, I can assist them with that as well.
Good. So let's talk a little bit about that. So what are some of the actions that businesses that they go, oh, wow, I have a great business, I want to make it into a franchise. First of all, how can they evaluate that it's truly a good business to make it into a franchise?
Yeah, so that's part of the consultation that we'll offer with them. But what we're going to look at is we're going to dig into the numbers, right, and see if it makes sense financially. If you are thinking about becoming a franchise but haven't figured out how to be profitable yet, now is not the time, right? Investors want to know that this thing is profitable and they can duplicate that success. So we really have to make sure that the baseline makes sense. Then after that, we have to look at, is the brand marketable? Is it trademarkable? We're going to look at the systems and processes. Can you explain someone how to do this? So for example, we all have a relative, maybe an aunt or grandma that cooks really well, right? They have that special, unique dish that you always think about for Thanksgiving, but they cannot write that recipe down, right? It's in their head. And if you try to do it the way they do it, there's just something missing, right? So in franchising, we have to be able to communicate to someone else how to do this thing in their market. And so let's make sure that we have the run books and the processes all laid out. It's interesting because you shift from, whatever the business model is to not just running that business, but to now supporting someone who's running that business. And so part of the process is actually making sure that as the business owner, you can actually take a step back from running the business yourself, maybe put a general manager in place or some sort of operations person who can do that job so that you can now support and finding the folks that are going to invest in that franchise and helping them along the way. You invest in a franchise because you want to save time and money. You don't want people figuring it out for themselves. And so you have to have either yourself or some staff ready that can help them accelerate that curve.
Absolutely. I think that is very, very important. And I think that, that's what we do. I completely understand that because I talk to business owners all the time and you gotta systematize and create the processes and the knowledge transfer in your business so you can communicate to someone else, whether you're going to franchise or not. But of course, when you want to franchise, you have to do that because you have to replicate yourself. You
Correct.
have to replicate the success replicated.
Yeah. Sometimes as business owners, we have so much stuff in our heads, right? We've done it and we just know what to do, what buttons to push when something goes wrong. But we've got to be able, I call it the hit by the bus theory. If, God forbid, you just are not available tomorrow, the business owner still has a business to run, right? And so if you can have a run book or some sort of system or process in place to help them, and a lot of it is just when stuff happens, write it down. Your frequently asked list should get really, really long, and that's good.
Absolutely. I just wrote an article about it. I wrote an article about why business owners actually resist writing processes or creating processes because we all need it. Otherwise, our businesses are not sustainable. They're just depending on an owner. They can't be transferred. They can't be replicated. What is your take on it? I mean, why do you think, if I ask you that question, I mean, Chris, why business owners are so resistant? Not all, but some can be resistant to writing processes, to document their processes. And they go, one day I'll get to it, or,
right.
Selling is more important, or going to events is more important. I have a trade show and I have this and I have that. We all have all of that. Why do you think this is happening? Like, what would you say?
I don't have the data to back this up, but I think that in most cases, business owners are visionaries, right? We understand what it takes to get stuff done, and we're just not good at writing it down, right? It doesn't bring us joy to write it down, and so we don't get good at it. Now, here's what I tell people. You don't have to do it, right? There are plenty of professionals out there that specialize in that. Use those resources to get those processes written down, and your business becomes way more scalable and therefore more attractable to future investors.
That's exactly right. And yeah, it's a good point. It doesn't bring joy. And I think sometimes can be looked at as too tedious, etc. You're right. That's why we exist. But also understanding that what are the consequences of not having it. It's much less joyful than having it, right? Because that can be also create that problem. So I agree with you 100%.
And sometimes it's just about sometimes it's just about personality type, right? We're good at, being in front of people and shaking hands, and because we're creating it, right? We've jumped out of the plane and we're building the parachute on the way down, right? And we didn't need that to be successful. So we assume that not everybody else needs it as well, but that's not true. People are different. And so the people that are going to be working for you and running this business, they need structure and they need direction, right? And when you don't have that, there's going to be a gap in how things are done.
That is so true. And I think it's also a point of, yes, it's also a perception of success. Yeah, we've been successful and why not? And I think it's also true that visionaries, we like all the problems and all the movement and everything, and we are needed. But I think the success is going to be tapped or capped at some point, because you can't be that successful if you do everything by yourself. I mean, you don't have enough time to do that. You do need the help of others as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, great point.
Yeah, that's very true. Chris, if people want to know more about what you do, they want to reach out to you, they need help, they want a consultation, how can they do that?
Sure. My website is LegacyFV, so LegacyFranchiseVentures.com, Chris at LegacyFV.com, office number 689-244-1914. I offer free consultations and would love to chat about, turning your franchise dreams into reality.
That is so cool. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you being a guest on this podcast. It's been a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.